Welcome everyone, I am the Depressed Dior, and this is Arkham Horror the card game. We're going to be doing the Path of Carcosa, or Path to Carcosa again. We did one a while back, he's playing as Zoe and Min. This time we'll be playing as Agnes Baker and Patrice Hathaway. Both of which I haven't played on camera. Agnes I have played with my other board game group, so I'm a bit familiar with how she plays, but I've never played Patrice before. Besides that, I believe, on my previous playthrough, I did make a number of rules mistakes. I think I made some involving the pallid mask guy, and I think there was a part where you're supposed to get a weakness, and I grabbed the wrong type of weakness towards the end. But hopefully, we'll do a little bit better this time. Also, we still have yet to. I think it's which one was it? Was it pallid mask? Phantom of Truth. One of these two, we have yet to actually succeed in the actual scenario, or last longer than a couple of rounds. So hopefully we'll do a little bit better. Anyway, so we'll go ahead and start with Agnes first. As you can see, I already have some trauma to start things off with. So as a mystic, we're going to, of course, start with both arcane researches and Down the Rabbit Hole, which we're already familiar with. But let's go ahead and actually read up on what she does. Agnes Baker, the waitress. She's 5 willpower, 2 intelligence, 2 strength, 3 agility. She's a sorcerer. As a reaction, after one or more horror is placed on Agnes Baker, you can deal 1 damage to an enemy at your location, limit once per phase. So a lot of key things you need to take into account here. One is it has to be horror that's placed on Agnes Baker. So if it's placed on, Pete Sylvester or your arcane initiates, then it doesn't count. The other thing to keep in mind is it's once per phase. So phases are literally mythos, investigation, enemy, upkeep, and so forth. This can definitely have some influence because there are ways to get horror on yourself during your investigation phase, as well as getting hit by a monster during the enemy phase. So you can definitely double up on this. Obviously, there are some limitations because she only has 8 sanity, and if she goes insane, then it doesn't really matter about her ability. Speaking of, she has 6 health, 8 sanity, and I got a quote here. I remember another life, one of sorcery and conquest. All right. Deck size, 30. Mystic cards, 0 through 5. Survivor, 0 to 2, and neutral, 0 to 5. This character is from the core set, so all the core sets generally have very straightforward deck building options, and having access to Survivor is always welcome. There are a lot of things you can mess around with that, including getting Pete Sylvester. She has to have Heirloom of Hyperborea, which is her exclusive, Dark Memory, which is her exclusive weakness, and of course, 1 random basic weakness. Agnes Baker may be just an unassuming waitress in this life, but in a previous life, in a time and age undreamed of in the modern world, she had been a powerful witch. It began when she found a strange artifact, a key of some kind, in a dusty collection of family belongings in her attic. When she touched it, the memories came flooding back, along with one word, Hyperborea. The more she delved into the visions and the memories of her former life, the stronger her powers grew, and the more frightened she became. All right. So yeah, pretty straightforward. Mystics are always a class I tend to do rather well with for the most part. The biggest danger, of course, is whiffing on your mulligan, because you do need to have some cards that actually make use of your willpower. Else you are kind of stuck, because usually the rest of your stats are going to be mediocre at best. Her ability is fantastic. There are definitely a lot of ways to get horror onto Agnes, and then there are, of course, ways to kind of heal that horror through things like Fearless and so forth. So just being able to do extra plink for extra 1 damage here and there is actually really useful, especially against things like Whippoorwills, because obviously Whippoorwills usually require additional actions to engage them before you can kill them, but with Agnes, she can just take a little bit of sanity, or take a little bit of horror damage and go from there. That being said, we are going to be doing Path to Carcosa, which is pretty dangerous when you have a lot of horror on you. But we'll see how that goes. Anyway, so yeah, 33 card deck. As mentioned before, we have 2 arcane researches that will help upgrade spells. And then Down the Rabbit Hole, which can upgrade any card, but if we ever buy a new card, it'll cost us 1 additional experience. The true arcane researches does mean she has 2 mental trauma, so she starts with 2 horror, which is going to be pretty rough for the first scenario of this campaign, because I believe the skull does increase based off the amount of horror you have on you. There's also a number of cards that will make you lose action, so you have a lot of horror on you. So it's just going to be we're going to be living on the edge with this. Anyway, all right, exclusive. Let's see, Heirloom of Hyperborea, artifact from another time. It's a item relic. Takes up the relic slot. 3-cost asset. Could be committed for a willpower, strength, or a wild, and a wild. It's and then all it does is after you play a spell card, you can draw a card. Doesn't have a limit, so you could potentially draw a lot of cards from this. The etchings on its surface change from day to day, shifting and moving whenever I'm not looking. Unfortunately, this card generally does not see very much play, mainly because it's just way too expensive. Spells are generally very expensive, as you've seen in many of my playthroughs where I play Mystics. Rite of Seeking costs 4, and I think eventually costs 5. And then Shriveling is kind of in the same boat. So usually you end up in a situation where if you do get this out, you usually don't have much else you can do with it. I mean, granted, you can use it in response to things like, Ward of Protection. You can also use it in response to Deny Existence. But again, it takes up your relic slot, and in most cases, you're going to be devoting that to something else, such as like your Holy Rosary, for example. So yeah, I don't think I've ever actually voluntarily played this. Usually, I just use it as a commit. Anyway, as for her weakness, it should be Dark Memory. There it is. Dark Memory. It's a spell, 2-cost event. Place 1 Doom on the current agenda. This effect can cause the current agenda to advance. Forced, if Dark Memory is in your hand at the end of your turn, reveal it and take 2 horror. So, this card can be pretty rough. There's a few things to note. One is the spell, which means if this is the only option you have when you do something like Arcane Initiate, for example, you have to draw it. In which case, you just drew your weakness. There are some benefits to this. You can use the 2 horror. It's not direct horror, so you can assign it to assets. So characters like Pete Sylvester can definitely help soak this extra horror damage gradually, little by little. The other thing is it can be used to get rid of your Arcane Initiate when you're done with her or just don't want to have that Doom trigger in advance. Other than that, though, the fact you're spending both 2 resources and an action to essentially play out an Ancient Evils is a bit rough. Compared to some of the other weaknesses that the core investigators have, it's generally not the worst, but it can be kind of rough. As for her random weakness, we got a Cursed Follower, which I believe we've done in a previous playthrough. Humanoid Cultist Cursed, 2 fight, 2 evade, 2 health. Spawns in the location farthest from you, has aloof, and at the end of the enemy phase, it just adds a curse token to the chaos back. If you happen to be playing a curse build, then this is just a benefit. Most cases, this can eventually accumulate and be kind of rough, but for the most part, it's generally seen as a rather soft weakness. So I definitely don't mind it. It is a cultist, so any of those wonderful Mythos encounter cards that can put Doom on cultists can put Doom on a Cursed Follower, though. So be careful about that. Anyway, as for the rest of the deck, most of it's going to be very similar to most of the Mystics I've played. We of course got Rite of Seekings for getting clues. We got Shrivelings for doing damage. We of course got the String of Curses for just doing auto evade and possibly murder non-elite enemies. We've of course got Uncage the Souls for economy to play our actual spells. Of course, got Ward of Protections. We also have some Deny Existences. We have Arcane Initiates that get said spells. We got a couple of Fearlesses to try to get some horror back, because obviously we're going to be starting with 2 already, and we're going to probably purposely put horror on ourselves just so we can do some additional damage. Holy Rosaries to, of course, get additional soak, as well as more willpower. She does have 5 willpower, so going up to 6 is fantastic. Promise of Power. She doesn't have a lot of skills in her deck, but Promise of Power is just there just in case we do need it. Also, if for whatever reason you do have 10 curses in the bag, you can use this as a source of horror damage to trigger her ability, though I wouldn't recommend it. But as for things that are different, for her hand slot, I do have some Sword Canes. This is a 2-cost asset, can be committed for 1 fist, takes up 1 hand slot, item, relic, weapon, melee. Playing it does not provoke a tax opportunity, and as a reaction after it enters play, you can immediately activate its activate ability without paying its cost. That does include the action cost, so you can essentially play it and activate it all in one action, which is very helpful. But otherwise, it's one action exhaust to fight or evade, and you may use your willpower instead of your strength and agility for this attack or evasion attempt. So this is just a way to kind of get some extra damage in. This is kind of an alternative to doing shriveling, because obviously shriveling does take up charges, and of course it also does extra damage. So if you're running it up against something like rats or something, you can always throw out a sword cane and just let that deal with the issue. And if you happen to run into something you're not ready for, you can always use this for an evasion, which is very helpful. And this thing, for that reaction ability, it does include all of its costs. So that includes the action and the exhaust. So you could potentially use the sword cane twice in one round by just playing it and then activating it multiple times off of that. Besides that, another alternative for Agnes, which I've done on my previous time playing her, is she does get access to survivor cards. So you could go something like Meat Cleaver. Meat Cleaver is pretty decent, simply because it gets stronger the more insane you get. But also you can use it to do horror to yourself, to not only get extra damage on the cleaver, but also to trigger her ability. Also, it is a method to heal horror as well, which is kind of interesting. But I want to go with Sword Cane because it does give me kind of an evasion option, which is something that my previous deck kind of lacked. Speaking of survivor cards, we do have long shots. So long shots are pretty unique because they don't actually have a skill icon, which means they can be committed to anything as long as it's a fight or evasion test. So you can actually commit this towards something like a shriveling, or you can even trigger it off your sword cane evade. And this is just another way to get more damage out, which is pretty helpful. We do have, of course, access to Pete Sylvester. So the previous time I played Agnes, I didn't actually go with Arcane Initiates at all, and I just went pure Pete Sylvester, which was great when the cards agreed with you. But if you whiffed your Mulligan, I felt it. Not having Arcane Initiate really hurts because you just don't have any card draw. So now I'm going to be juggling both Arcane Initiates and Pete Sylvester. Obviously, Pete Sylvester is very useful because he eventually gets strong enough to, if you upgrade him, he does get +1 willpower. He also just gives alternatives for soaking horror that you don't want to take, and of course, he can self-heal. Besides that, yeah, I think those are my only survivor cards. Yeah, long shots and Pete Sylvester's this time around. We do have some painkillers. These are items, assets. They can be committed for 1 will. They only cost 1, and they have 3 supply on them. As a lightning bolt, you can spend a supply to exhaust it and take 1 horror to heal 1 damage. So this is not only a way to heal, but also a way to trigger her ability. Do note that you have to heal a horror, or not? Sorry, you have to heal a damage. I think. Yeah, you do have to heal a damage, I believe, because you can only activate things that change the game state. So yeah, this is just a way to heal and trigger her ability and just keep pumping out damage. Also, you can just throw this. You can also put the horror on Pete Sylvester if you just want generic healing. So it's definitely not too bad. It's very cheap. Let's see. As for the remaining new card, we have Forbidden Knowledge. So it's a talent. Assets can be committed for 1 book. 0 cost. Uses 4 secrets, and if it has no secrets, you discard it. As a lightning bolt, you can exhaust it and take 1 horror and move 1 secret from the Forbidden Knowledge to your resource pool as a resource. So this is her way to develop, produce some economy. In combination with Pete Sylvester, this is pretty much rather nice. Over the course of time, it does produce more resources than a emergency cache. Also, it's a way to trigger her ability if you ever need it. So yeah, it's not too shabby, but it's just another way for her to get some much needed money to fund her spells. And that's pretty much it. In the future, I do plan on grabbing something like Charisma, so I can have both Arcane Initiate and Pete Sylvester out at the same time. But that's kind of the gist of it. Also, again, with Forbidden Knowledge, we can also use this to kill off our Arcane Initiate gradually, so we don't have to worry about the doom that's on her. Also, I think I've already pointed it out, but we do have Fearless to heal horror, so just another way to mitigate some of the horror that we're going to be gradually accumulating. All right, and that's pretty much for Agnes. Very straightforward, pretty much the original OG Mystic. So yeah, you've seen me play Mystics before, so you probably got a decent idea of what's coming. So as for what we're not going to see coming, we got Patrice Hathaway, the violinist. She's a performer, cursed, 4 willpower, 2 intelligence, 2 strength, 2 agility. Your maximum hand size is reduced by 3, so her maximum hand size is 5. During each upkeep phase, instead of drawing 1 card, discard all non-weakness cards in your hand and then draw until you have 5 cards in hand. Oh, actually, I don't think I talked about her. I didn't actually talk about her Elder Sign, I don't think. So Elder Sign is just +1 for every horror she has on it. It's actually not that great. Anyway, yeah, as for Patrice's Elder Sign, it's +1, and then after the test ends, doesn't have to pass, you may shovel all but 1 card from your discard pile into your deck. So this is pretty helpful, because as you can tell, she essentially cycles through her deck a lot faster than other people. Everyone else draws 1 card, she draws 5 every round. She does have 7 health and 7 sanity, and yeah. So yeah, if you get a weakness or any sort of effect that reduces hand size that comes into play, this definitely hurts Patrice very, very much. You can definitely find her in a very, very poor state because of that. But besides that, the idea around her is to essentially make sure that everything you draw is something you can use no matter what. Which there are definitely ways to do that through Survivor. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at the other side of her card. Her deck size is 42. She has Survivor 0 to 5, Mystic 0 to 2, and then Neutral 0 to 5. She has to have Patrice's Violin, which is her exclusive, Watcher from Another Dimension, which is her exclusive weakness, and then 1 random basic weakness. All her life, Patrice has lived for music. The soaring sonatas, the graceful arias, and the booming marches have always been her closest companion. But sometimes when she plays, she can sense some alien intelligence at the edge of her awareness, something that watches her and waits, something that hungers. The presence has been growing over the last month, and her increasing nervousness is starting to spoil her ability to play the violin. That's not something she can tolerate. After her last concert in the Ward Theater in Arkham, she finally decided to take action. All right, so again, having a splash of Mystic is always useful because that gets you access to things like Ward Protection and so forth. We do have In the Thick of It. So this deck is based off something I saw on Arkham DB, essentially called Desperate Patrice or something like that, or Desperation Patrice. Their version, they went with actual 2 arcane researches instead, which in the long run does technically get you 1 additional experience in the long run, as far as the deck build is concerned. But in the case of In the Thick of It, it feels like it gets the deck going a little bit faster. And honestly, the purpose of In the Thick of It and/or the arcane researches is just to get her into desperation mode faster. So I went with In the Thick of It, so that gets me 3 experience to play with, and you can probably guess what at least one of them is if you're familiar with these cards. So first, before we dive into that, let's go ahead and go over her exclusive. So Patrice's Violin. Some of the help text is covering everything. Patrice's Violin, it's an item instrument, takes up a hand slot, has the subtitle My Muse. 2-cost assets can be committed for willpower, agility, and wild. As a lightning bolt, you can choose and discard 1 card from your hand and exhaust Patrice's Violin. Choose and investigate at your location to either gain 1 resource or draw a card. So this helps ensure that the cards in your hand are at least used for something, even if it's just for resources. So it's definitely not a bad exclusive to have, especially if you happen to have your hands free, which this deck will definitely have its hands free. Her weakness, Watcher from Another Dimension. Monster, extra dimensional, has 5 fight, 5 evade, 2 health, peril, hidden, hunter. Revelation, secretly add this enemy to your hand. You may fight or evade this enemy while it is in your hand, as if it were at your location. If you succeed, discard it from your hand. If you fail, you spawn it engaged with you. Forced, when your deck runs out of cards, if this enemy is in your hand, it attacks you from your hand. So, and it hits for 3 damage. So it's pretty beefy. So yeah, this thing is pretty rough. It does a number of things. Obviously, if it cycles through your deck, it's going to hit you, which is going to hurt. The other thing you can do is it's a weakness in your hand, which means you never discard it, which does mean you're cycling slower through your deck, which I guess is also sort of a good thing because that means you're not going to trigger the Watcher as much. The good news is if you do successfully fight it or evade it, doesn't matter if you do any damage at all, as long as it is a success, you will discard it from your hand. Bad news, of course, is if you auto-fail or just fail in general, it will be put into play, in which case you have to actually do 2 damage to it. And it's still a 5/5, which is pretty rough. So a lot of this is going to revolve around having something to deal with it. Yeah, as for her generic weakness, we have Haunted. I think we've had it before. It's a curse, add Haunted to your threat area, you get -1 to each of your skills. Double action, discard it. So more than likely we'll just double action, get rid of it. It's nothing too nasty there. Anyway, so a few things I was kind of curious about. When a encounter card, enemy card, this is classified as an enemy, right? Yep, it's classified as an enemy. So yeah, there are ways to kind of deal with the Watcher from another dimension. Deny existence can buy you essentially another cycle, which is always helpful. One thing to know, of course, is since you're cycling through your deck faster, you will be gradually taking one horror over and over again because that's what happens whenever you have to reshuffle your own deck. Anyway, so yeah, we do have a splash of 0 to 2 Mystic, which with her 4 willpower and the rest of her stats being pretty mediocre, you usually tend to lean towards making use of those Mystic cards because those actually use your willpower. I do have a Rite of Seeking. Initially, I think I had 2 Rite of Seekings and then 2 of the Evade spell, mainly just to try to deal with the Watcher from another dimension. But since I am starting with 3 experience, I'm already gotten started with her primary benefit is using Mind's Eye. So Mind's Eye is a ritual, takes up 2 arcane slots, so it takes up both of them. It's Myriad, which means you can get 3 copies of this at the cost of only 2 experience. It's a 3-cost asset, can be committed for 1 willpower. Has 3 secrets on it. As a reaction, whenever you would test any of your primary stats. Yeah, if you're testing any of your primary stats besides willpower, you can spend a secret to test willpower instead. So instead of doing a fight action with your 2 fight, you could do a fight action with your 4 willpower. Same thing for evade. And then, of course, same thing for investigation. All right. As a lightning bolt, you can discard a copy of Mind's Eye from your hand to place 2 secrets on this copy of Mind's Eye. So what's really nice about this is, I mean, the big issue, of course, is it takes up your arcane slots. You're not going to be able to play this along with any other spell in most cases. But this is just a way to generically be able to use your willpower to do all sorts of things. It's relatively cheap. The other thing that's really nice about it is if you have copies of this and you have them in your hand, you can just discard them to add more charges to your Mind's Eye, which is always useful. So essentially, if you had a full hand of these, you can essentially go up to 7 secrets, I think. So yeah, pretty straightforward. The other experience point I spent was for Miss Doyle, Cat General of Ulthar. Ally creature Dreamlands, 3-cost ally, does take up the ally slot, can be committed for 1 wild, limit once per deck. Forced, when she enters play, search your bonded cards for Hope, Zeal, and Agur, or Agur, I don't know how to pronounce that. Randomly choose 1 to put into play, and then shuffle the other 2 in the deck. When Miss Doyle leaves play, you take the cards out of game. She has 2 health and 2 sanity. So yeah, by herself she doesn't do anything, but she does bring out these cards randomly. So we got Agur. Yeah, I believe, all these are ally creature Dreamlands. They are 1-cost assets, but they can all be played as fast. They don't take up any slots. They are classified as allies, and they all have different commits depending on what they can do. Essentially, it generally does the opposite, the remaining symbols that it doesn't actually use. So Agur here uses book, so its commits are fight and agility. Zeal here uses buffs up fight, so it's going to give a commit of book and agility, and then Hope, of course, does intelligence and fight. So what's nice about these guys is if they, as an action, if they are ready, you can exhaust or discard her. or him in the case of Hope. And you can do whatever actions on them. So Agura is Investigate, and you'll end up investigating as a base 5 intelligence, which is always useful. If you choose to discard instead of exhaust, you don't even have to make the check. You'll automatically succeed on the Investigate, and then you'll shuffle it back into your deck and then put a Hope or Zeal into play from your discard pile. So yeah, so this is a kind of a way to constantly cycle these guys in and out, which is pretty helpful. Also, this is just a way to get these cards back into your deck so you can keep delaying the cycling of your deck. So yeah, Agura is essentially for Investigates. Zeal is for fighting. If you discard him, it's automatically successful. And then for Hope, it's for Evade. And again, if you discard Hope, it will automatically succeed. So yeah, very, very helpful. One thing to note is you can only have one of these out in play. As it says, they're forced after they enter play. You have to discard the other two. So not too big of a issue. Once you get one of them in the discard, you can essentially constantly cycle them in and out over and over again, getting a bunch of auto succeeds, which is very helpful. Again, you can also use this in conjunction of Watcher from Another Dimension to ensure that you pass the test, which is always useful. Anyway, as for the rest of the deck, let's see. So we have a lot of skills and a lot of events. Let's just put it that way. Like I said before, the idea here is to just try to get into desperation mode and make use of the desperation cards. So first, let's talk about how to get to desperation mode very easily. St. Hubert's Key, Cleansing Fire. I believe we've seen this before. 4-cost asset. It takes up an accessory, gives you +1 willpower and intelligence, but you do get -2 sanity. And when you would be defeated by horror, you can discard it and immediately heal 2 horror. So this, in combination of In the Thick of It, will make it so you are down to only 3 sanity left. And that is the requirement for Desperation. So let's talk about Desperation cards. So they are skill cards. They all have the keyword Desperate, and they all commit for 4 of a symbol. And you can only commit 1 per test. The key thing is you can only commit these if you have 3 or fewer remaining sanity. So again, with the 2 mental trauma that we start with In the Thick of It, and St. Hubert's Key, we can immediately hit Desperation mode, and then we've just turned our 2s and 4s into 8s and 6s. There's one for each of the stats. So there is Run for Your Life, which is Agility, Reckless Assault, which is for fighting, or strength rather. We have not Last Chance. We have Desperate Search for Intelligence. There's also one for willpower, but I don't think that one's in the deck because we don't really need it as badly. Also, we have a bunch of other skill cards just so we have something to use. We have, of course, Manual Dexterities, Perceptions. We, of course, have Unexpected Courage. Just a lot of ways to make use of these as they come in. We also have Last Chance, which can only be committed if there are no other cards committed to it, and it loses one wild for each card in your hand. So if this is the last card in your hand, this essentially will commit for 5 wilds, which is very helpful. Even if you have a few cards in your hand, it still kind of plays rather well. The only time it kind of sucks is if you have both Last Chances in your hand, in which case you're kind of stuck. Besides that, we do have some Defiances, which just can help ignore symbol effects as well as be used as a wild. We do have, of course, Promise of Power for more generic wilds. And that's, I think, it for... Oh, there it is. Say Your Prayers. We do have the willpower one. So that's the one for willpower. Anyway, so yeah, a lot of skill cards. We do have some allies. We, of course, have Miss Doyle, but we also have Madame Labranche, Mysterious Benefactress. She has 2 health, 2 sanity, can commit for 1 book, and she's a 2-cost asset, ally patron. And if you have no cards in your hand, you can exhaust her to get a card. And if you have no resources, you can exhaust her to gain 1 resource. So very, very useful, especially if you're doing something like a Dark Horse build, or in the case of Patrice, you just want to cycle through your hand as much as possible. We also, of course, have 1 Pete Sylvester. So we have 1 of each of these. As long as we have a combination of these characters, we're usually going to be in good shape. I do plan on getting Charisma as soon as possible. If possible, if we get 2 Charismas, I may consider getting a 2nd Charisma so we can get all 3 of these out at once, in which case I'll have tons of soak and lots of abilities. We do have some improvised weapon as well as winging it, which are improvised cards, which can be played from your discard. Of course, winging it is the one that does the -1 shroud, and if you play it from your discard, it gets you 1 clue, or an additional 1 clue. Improvised weapon makes it so they have -1 fight, and if you play it from your discard, it does +1 damage. So again, just more ways to try to make use of the fact that you're cycling through your hand every round. So having some of the cards that you can play from your discard is very useful. Of course, we got some Fearlesses just to heal some horror if we need to. And yeah, we do have some Prophecies. Again, this is just a source of some additional wilds. More than likely, I'm probably going to replace these because they're kind of iffy. Besides that, as you can tell, there's not very many assets in this. It's just all about using everything that's in your hand. There's definitely some Survivor cards that can also make use of kind of turn all the cards in your hand into something more useful. Which is always good. So this build is going to be try to be as much flexy as possible, and hopefully it will do okay. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. Very, very straightforward. I don't know how well she'll play. Like I said, this will be my first time playing Patrice. Hopefully she does as well as, what's her face, Safina, since that was the first time I played her in the previous run we just did. Besides that, I think that's it. Sorry for being a little rambly towards the end, but we'll be diving into Card Call next time. And yeah, I am the Depressed Dior. This was Arkham Horror, the card game, the Path of Carcosa again. And I will see you guys next time.